It's Scotty G. Now, we've talked before the difference between someone managing your utility bill and leading your employees. So what we're going to do is get into difficult conversation. So you have somebody, an employee, that there's a negative behavior. So I've communicated with a lot of store managers, area managers on how to address specific negative behaviors. And really it comes to making sure that you have the difficult conversation. So for some managers and leaders, they find it difficult to have the difficult conversation. For me, it's difficult for me not to have the difficult conversation. So if there's a negative behavior that's going on, like if I notice it, it's on. Like I'm going to address it, making sure that it doesn't affect the consumer, but we're going to have a conversation. And the main reason why is that negative behavior needs to stop. So when you're having a negative conversation, to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to give you a hint, okay? When you're talking to somebody, first thing is there's something that we did wrong as a leader for this behavior to occur. Once you go ahead and you squash that and you realize that there's a negative behavior that was occurred by an employee, sit down with them, make sure to do your homework, have a witness there, but you want to go over what the correct behavior is. Okay, but you have to have the negative conversation, but it doesn't have to be negative. So the reason why I'm telling you this is because the secret is you're not addressing the employee. You're addressing the behavior. So once you're able to sit down and just talk to the employee about the behavior, separate from talking to the employee about the employee, it makes the conversation a lot easier. Makes it more casual. It makes it more like the employee and you as the leader are part of the process, which is their growth and development, which really, in hindsight, which is 2020, the conversation's really happening because you need to address a negative behavior that occurred. So there's a couple things that happened. The employee learned what the right behavior is. The employee also learned what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. The employee also understood the importance of representing our brand correctly. And now our consumers, your consumers, are able to get that experience that is consistent with your standard operating procedures that make sure that you exceed your consumers' expectations. So I will tell you, I have been in many rooms before, and really what I've heard is, this employee's been, talking to me like this or talking negative to me for the past 2 weeks. And my first question's going to be, okay, well, how did the conversation go 2 weeks ago? And if the conversation didn't happen, well, then the conversation now doesn't flip to where I'm really addressing the negative behavior of who the manager's talking about, to really now I have to address the negative behavior of that leader that's in the room. Why? It was their job to make sure to address the negative behavior of the other employee. Because why? If they would have, I told them, it wouldn't have continued for the past 2 weeks. So if you have a negative behavior that's happening over the past 2 weeks inside one of your stores, raise your hand. Did you address it? Did you talk about it? Did you go over what the right process is? And did you go over what the expectation is? If they do succeed, give them some positive reinforcement. And then go ahead and also let them know that if something does happen to go down a negative path, there's a difference between an ability and a core competency and like a will. Okay, if the will's not there and someone just doesn't care, well, that negative conversation really needs to turn into, maybe some disciplinary action, but we don't really want to go that route. The route you want to go in is to understand that whatever the behavior is, it's the employee's choice. But you're not addressing the employee, you're addressing the behavior because you love the employee. The behavior just needs to stop. That's it, but it won't stop unless you address it. That's why it's important to address the negative behaviors.